What is it that makes Lake Chelan so special?
First of all, it's the third deepest lake in the United States. It's like 27th in North America, but it was still a very deep lake at, 1,486 feet. It's also what we call ultra-oligotrophic. At least that's what it's been in the past. And that just means really low nutrient levels or food levels. And so that's why it's very clear.
Dr. Phil Long is a scientist and director of the Lake Chelan Research Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to understanding the environment of Lake Chelan and its surrounding ecosystems.
I have a friend, we were walking across the Woodin Avenue Bridge one day, and she looked into the water and said, "Phil, what do you put in the water in Lake Chelan to make it so clear?" Well, of course, it's nothing, right? And this is what we want to do, is protect the lake. Our byline for the Institute, clear into the future, that's where we want to be.
That means, in part, sampling the water quality and monitoring for invasive species, plants and animals that could pose a risk if they're introduced to Lake Chelan waters.
We realized we'd gone 9 years with 0 water quality samples on Lake Chelan, which is kind of hard to get the trends if you don't have continuous sampling. So we've gone from a first quarterly sampling, now we do monthly sampling at 3 sites, and that's funded by City of Chelan, for one thing, Chelan County, Lake Chelan Reclamation District, and the Conservation District.
When you came back and did the first water quality testing in almost a decade, what did you find? What had changed?
Well, very little, actually. Since the very first water quality measurement that was made in 1986 and 1987. That was the first water quality study, and unfortunately at that time there wasn't the funding to keep doing that. But to do trends, you really need to be able to do the kind of thing we're doing now with monthly sampling. So this is the great story for Lake Chelan. You can't really tell the difference in water quality in Lake Chelan in the middle of the lake between now and 1987. So that's the good news. The not so good news is that we're starting to see more attached green algae on the margins of the lake. And so it's various stringy green things, and people started noticing this in the last few years, especially last year. We started getting calls. People would call the PUD or they would call us. The PUD would refer them to us and they would say, "What is this green stuff growing on my swim step in the lake that I'd never seen before?" So that's what we're trying to deal with now. Unfortunately, the Public Power Benefit Program of the PUD is giving us some funding to address that issue. Over the next 3 years, we'll be monitoring to understand where and what times of the year this kind of stuff is growing. And is it something we can do anything about? What do we need to do? What's the cause of it? And can we affect it? It could be as simple as a slight increase in temperature, or maybe the organisms are adapting to Lake Chelan in a way they haven't done before.
Things like changes in temperature, changes in pH can change the way a species that has always existed behaves in the water.
Right, yeah. This historic range of what it's done in the past is changing for some reason, or you do have an introduction of a new species. So one of the things we're seeing this year as we begin this study funded by the PUD is that we're seeing these attached diatoms, which they have a stalk that attaches them to a surface. And it looks like fluffy, really fluffy cotton candy, only it's very mobile in the water. And so you see that fluffing around, and it's not dark green like some of the periphyton is. It's very light colored. But it turns out these are organisms that typically we think are actually just free floating. They're planktonic, as we say, in the lake. Now they're attached and they're growing this spring in a way we hadn't seen before.
Long's Institute has become a valuable partner for Chelan County's Natural Resources Department, where specialist Lisa Dowling is a frequent collaborator.
We are seeing increases in algae growth happening around the nearshore environment, and an influx in aquatic invasive species that are kind of thought to be sentinels for long-term changes that we really need to keep tracks on and make sure that we are adapting the way that we manage water quality and detect water quality issues so that we can make sure Lake Chelan has great water quality well into the future. We know that, many decades ago, we didn't have a lot of Eurasian milfoil and Asian clams throughout the lake. We do have folks that have lived in and around the lake for many years, and some of their anecdotal observations are ways that we can understand, well, this beach used to have no clams and now it is thoroughly infested. Now, species like Asian clams and Chinese mystery snails likely were brought here by early settlers as a food source. And then other species like Eurasian milfoil and curly-leaf pondweed probably hitched a ride on watercrafts over decades. Exactly when they came to the lake is tough to pin down, but they've been growing a lot. And we recently did a survey for those species in 2021, which was the first survey that had been completed since 2014. And for a lot of these species, their big claim to fame is that they can blow up at a moment's notice if they get a really good condition going. So we were not surprised, but a little disappointed to find that there had been an extreme growth in Eurasian milfoil and curly-leaf pondweed in that period of time. Prior to that assessment, we thought that Lake Chelan did not have suitable habitat for some of these other invasive mussels that are extremely concerning, named quagga and zebra mussels. We don't have those in Washington State, we don't have them in Lake Chelan, and we want to keep it that way. They require a certain range of dissolved calcium and oxygen for suitable habitat, and we thought that Lake Chelan had such low levels of those things that it didn't provide suitable habitat. But what we found is that Asian clams, for example, can alter the habitat at the microclimate scale in a way where it's not only suitable but kind of fantastic habitat for quagga zebra mussels. And a lot of those existing clam beds are in places where we see a lot of watercraft usage as well. So those things, when taken together, raise some concerns.
That is kind of a cryptic impact to lake water quality that could be beneficial. It could be they're filter feeders. They're removing some of the stuff that may make the lake less clear, but also, they're interfering with the normal phytoplankton growth and potentially taking up food that the fish could eat, the kokanee that people love fishing for in Lake Chelan.
Minimum responsibilities is you want to walk around the entire outside of the vessel, make sure that you don't have any little bits of plant fragments and pieces hanging off your trailer or your boat at all. Any of those internal tanks, like ballast tanks, you want to pull the plugs out and have them totally drained. You want to make sure that any pools of water on the inside of the boat have been dried up and cleaned out. You want to make sure that life jackets and ropes and things like that may hold on to water have been thoroughly dried out.
Stephen Lesky, one of Dowling's fellow natural resource specialists with Chelan County, explains how a new appliance installed at the lakeside marina can help boat owners avoid transferring contaminants between lakes.
So this system here, we have a compressed air nozzle for blowing stuff off of the boat, any dry debris that may have been accumulated during the time on the water. We also have a scrub brush for brushing any algae that may accumulate along the water line or on the engine as they're out doing their thing. A set of tongs for grabbing vegetative debris, so we don't want to introduce any more of that stuff to the Columbia River or neighboring lakes that have lower amounts of that. And also a vacuum system for sucking in water out of the bilge that might not get pumped out with the bilge pump operations, and a way to additionally help boaters keep their boats clean.
It doesn't matter if you own a boat or not. If you care about the lake, there are ways that you can help participate and things that you can do to reduce the risk to the lake. And it can be as simple as the way that you recreate in and around the lake, or the communications that you have around the coffee table with your friends. And if you have spare time, coming and helping us when we do Restore the Shore events or any other kind of volunteer event. There's a lot that can happen out there that will benefit our lake.